So we're recording now.
I think you could call this Series 6, Episode 2!
Oh,
it's a gem.
Well, I mean, I think we're just to give people a little bit of context, we're sitting here in the middle of a very strange week in this country, I think, following the death of Her Majesty, unfortunately.
Yes.
And the funeral is on Monday.
That's right.
And the distillery is going to be closed, and most of the UK, I think, is going to be closed on Monday.
Now, there's not many times the distillery, and we're talking about Glengoyne, because we're in the boardroom of Glengoyne.
We are in the boardroom.
There's not many times the distillery closes. It's a real sign of respect.
No, absolutely.
And that'll be repeated around the industry, would you imagine?
I think it will be. Yeah, most distilleries, I think, are shut. We're not even producing, so we're not going to be mashing at all. It's a complete shutdown. I mean, undoubtedly, a momentous day and a time to show respect, whatever your views are of the monarchy.
I think so. And I think what we'd like to do is have a themed episode a little bit about the royals and whisky, because they're intertwined, but it would be nice to pay our respects to the late Queen with a dram. I think.
Well, of course. I mean, it's whiskey unscripted. So,
what would you like to toast?
Well, I've found myself a little Linkwood 12 flora and fauna here.
Nice.
And I mean, I think the thing about Linkwood is it's always been one of those whiskies which, you don't drink a lot of it. Actually, you don't find it everywhere. But, this particular one, 43%, it's from the flora and fauna range. So it's from the same sort of range that we used to have for... just pouring it out here.
Yeah, no,
that we used to have for Rosebank that Diageo produced. So it's a Diageo distillery, 43%. But I mean, the thing that really strikes you about it's very fruity, light coloured. So probably more in that bourbon maturation refill area. Yeah. So vanilla's of course to the fore, but it has this real sort of wide variety of fruits, from grapes to a bit of perfume, a bit of very lovely, and then there's this maltiness that comes through. I'm going to have a little taste.
And Linkwood, Gordon, just geographically, Linkwood.
Oh.
Where is it?
I'm trying to remember exactly where
I was trying to. It's not really on the beaten path.
It's a distillery up on Speyside.
Yep. No, that's fine. That's all.
But near Elgin.
Right.
But it's not one that you. It's not one people go, oh, Linkwood Distillery, whatever. It's certainly a little bit off the beaten track, and obviously I think probably, it's been closed, of course, but it's a Diageo distillery which created some amazing whiskies, but it's just sort of in the Elgin area and on the burn of Linkwood, in fact.
No, I've never.
Just outside Elgin. So it's on that top part of Speyside, but
which is, we're talking about the Queen and making this an episode. It's a regal royal episode. You're not kicking the teeth off of Royal Deeside up there.
A wee bit further away, but not too far. I mean, Tom and Tool's probably one of the closest distilleries. We'll come on to a little bit of the others that are, but no, you're not. You are quite close to the. You are quite close to that part of the world, obviously, where Her Majesty passed away. But we'll come on to that. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking, and it's going to be a triumph of pronunciation.
Oh right.
I'm drinking. We had Alex Bruce on the show a
few episodes, a couple of years ago.
So that would get you if you knew your owners and managing directors, Ardnamurchan.
Ardnamurchan.
Now this is Ardnamurchan, and this is the Paul Launois. Ardnamurchan.
Are you French?
Yes, I will be after I drink this, because it's 57.6%. So first fill bourbon barrels, and then it gets finished in a cask from Paul Launois, a champagne producer in Mesnil-sur-Orgère. So
you're definitely not French.
No, I'm not French. So that's interesting, Gordon. A little wine finish on it as well. And
what's that tasting like?
Peppery, fruity, peppery. My first Ardnamurchan, I have to say.
Oh, it's quite fragrant on the nose, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's very nice.
Sort of berries. So I think it's
well, let's raise a little toast to Her Royal Highness Queen Elizabeth.
Slainte.
So if we look at the Queen and we look at her association with whiskey, I think it was well known that she liked a gin.
Yes.
But that didn't mean that she didn't enjoy a dram from time to time, I believe.
I think they appreciated it as well, and I think we are sitting in the boardroom of Glengoyne, and the Queen's mother, of course, quite famously gave this place a royal warrant, or at least the owners, Lang Brothers, in 1984, a royal warrant that's lasted until 2002, until her death, and you're allowed to keep that warrant for 5 years. And on investigation, Gordon, a few years ago, I contacted the palace, and they were very, very kind and sort of emailed me back a few times to confirm indeed that the Queen Mother used to be supplied, because your royal warrant is about being supplied. You're supplying the royal household. And the Glengoyne 10, although they couldn't be specific, and Lang's blended whisky, the Supreme blends, the Lang's 8, the Lang's 12, Glengoyne 10 would be part of the consignment down to Clarence House. And I believe the Queen Mother used to give everyone a palate cleanser before the meal. So it was a wonderful honour to be bestowed upon this distillery, and indeed the owners, who at the time, of course, were Edrington.
Of course.
And
I mean, other distilleries that spring to mind that I am aware of is Lafroig has a royal warrant for His Royal Highness Prince Charles, now King Charles. So I'm assuming that royal warrant will then change to become a royal warrant for the King. I'm not too sure how it works, but every time you pick up a bottle of Lafroig, that royal warrant is on the package. So and he was there not that long ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago.
what a wonderful place.
Lafroig.
Last episode, just in case you're joining us,
Yes.
we were there last episode as well, Gordon, and you've almost, I'm not going to say too much, but yeah, we'll have a little royal quiz later on. But the royal connection to whisky really stretches right back, and when I say right back, in series gone by, we used to do the day or the year that changed whisky. And this is the 200th anniversary of King George IV, our Queen's great, grandfather, arriving in Edinburgh on a royal visit, and no king had set foot on Scottish soil since before the first Jacobite rebellion. And this visit was overseen by none other than Sir Walter Scott, he of the Waverley novels, he that used to write about Rob Roy McGregor, who used to sheep rustle around these very hills that we're looking onto. And he wrote what really was historical fiction. And not only did the world fall in love with the romantic tales from Scotland, so did the king. He wanted to come and visit. And maybe it be apocryphal, Gordon, but certainly in most whisky books talk about Sir Walter Scott rowing out to the flagship of the king, docked just off of Edinburgh, and asking what, my liege, you would like to drink before you set foot in Scottish soil. And he says, why, I'll have some of that lovely whisky from the Glenlivet Valley. I'll have some Highland single malt whisky, which of course, in those days, was illegal to consume south of that Highland line, which was drawn up in 1784. So the king effectively was breaking the law. And within a year, that legislation where you could not export Highland whisky to the south was taken off the map. But the line still stands, and that's where Glengoyne is bisected through that Highland line. So that there was other reasons for effective legalisation of the Excise Act in 1823, but a colourful story and quite a colourful character, George IV's visit to the capital of Scotland, the 200th anniversary. And that really is the starting pistol for legalisation in Scotch whisky the year after, 1823. So there's a royal connection already, Gordon.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think the other thing, of course, is we if we just look a little bit into the history of maybe more specific distilleries, and we look more into the sort of history of in the 1800s, for example, we know that the distillery closest to Balmoral, Royal Lochnagar,
Yes.
received its royal warrant in 1848 when John Begg invited Prince Albert to visit the distillery from the nearby Balmoral Castle. And I think it just sort of shows that when you have something that is as fundamental to Scotland as whisky, it's really great to see that it's such a big part of the royals have such a big role in it as well.
And that really was, Gordon. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert can be said, and there was many reasons that why Scotch whisky is now the world's renowned liquid it is, and there's many reasons for that. One of them was in the 19th century, that royal approval from Victoria and Albert, who set up Balmoral 1848, as you're saying, and really started to embrace Scotch whisky and encourage people from the south to come up and visit Scotland. It wasn't a wilderness, it was to be enjoyed. Lots of lovely food up here, and also whisky. And that middle and upper classes realising it was okay to drink what previously was considered an outdoor drink for the gillies on the moors, shooting the game. This would heat you up. It was now a respectable middle class drink. And Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were really responsible, I would say, partly for getting Scotch whisky to the heights it would reach by the end of the 19th century.
And then the other one that springs to mind, of course, is Royal Brackla, which is a distillery owned by Bacardi Dewars, and actually that got its royal warrant just before Lochnagar. Lochnagar, obviously, location-wise, very close to Balmoral. Brackla, not quite as close, but it received its royal warrant, its seal of approval from King William. So
yes.
before the Victorian era, and that was led to Brackla being known as the King's Own whisky. So clearly, whisky, and the royals go back a really, really long way.
And what I like about the story that then takes up pace after the 1850s, 1860s, the phylloxera aphid hits France, devastates the regions of Champagne and Loire. You get the cognac and brandy disappearing, so Scotch now becomes the replacement for that drink that people used to enjoy so much. And then you get those wonderful Scottish entrepreneurs, the Victorian geniuses of Tommy Dewar and James Buchanan of Black and White, and indeed Tommy Dewar and his other friend Tommy Lipton, who was the tea entrepreneur. So you had Tommy Lipton and Tommy Dewar at the very peak of British society. I think Tommy Dewar was the second person to own a car. Tommy Lipton, racehorses, used to race the Derby alongside their good friends, the Prince of Wales.
He also challenged for the America's Cup.
There you go. He was a big sailor, of course.
He was.
And that did take a lot of deep pockets.
It does take a lot of deep pockets.
It does now, but I'm sure back then it did as well.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
you had these Scottish, two Scotch Toms, one of them in the whisky industry at the very top of Victorian society when whisky was booming and the money was plentiful.
And then even if you go a little bit more sort of present day to the current not current, unfortunately, the Queen or the late Queen.
It's very difficult though.
It's very difficult.
It's such a transition at the moment.
It is. She visited Bowmore, which is a distillery. That we've just been there, of course. On if you want to hear our visit, listen to the first episode. But she visited her first ever visit to a Scotch whisky distillery was Bowmore, 1980. Good to see she picked a really accessible one. But she visited Bowmore in 1980, so that's 42 years ago. So that's unbelievable amount of.
And that really wasn't at the height of the whisky boom.
No, the whisky boom.
1980 was we were retreating from whisky.
No, and it was part of the Morrison family at that point. That was ahead of the purchase of Bowmore by Suntory in the 90s, and then the current. But I remember stories of her visiting there, and she was quite taken by it, and as a location, quite taken by the style of the whiskey, and that was the first distillery she ever visited. And anybody else knows any other distilleries that the Queen has visited, that would be nice to know. I'm sure she's visited a few.
But that's the power of, people sometimes say the monarchy, is it still relevant? But there's an industry that was in decline.
Absolutely.
She goes and visits in 1980. And I can see, I don't know much about that visit, but I'm reading in between the lines that trying to shore up an industry that was suffering in 1980 anyway. So if you can get royal approval, as we've talked about, Queen Victoria, Prince Albert, it goes a long way, Gordon. A royal warrant, or at least royal approval, can really resonate with the customers and distributors and people that consume the whisky.
Absolutely, and also a bit closer to home. And she, I know that she visited the Allied Distillers bottling plant in Dumbarton as well. Not quite as, picturesque maybe as Isla, but she was absolutely involved and visiting and positive for the industry. Of course.
Yes, and it's a place I'd like to talk about because I've done a little bit of research, but it's not really for this episode. But Hiram Walker, when he arrives just after Prohibition in 1934, it might be 36, purchases places in Dumbarton, and that's really one of the first times that the Scottish whisky industry have a proper automated from grain to bottle operation going on. He really sort of industrialises the process, and I think that's something we must tuck away
Absolutely.
for another episode.
No, so I mean, in this week of mourning, I guess it's nice just to touch on what the late Queen has done for this industry and the Royals in a slightly wider context.
I think it's not to be underestimated, their contribution to it as well.
Totally.
As well. Right through royalty from as you've mentioned, George IV, we talked about, right through William IV before Queen Victoria, and then straight through to, I don't want to ruin one of my quiz questions, Gordon, right through to another king, to the present day with Charles and the Queen visiting Bowmore. It has been very important to have their patronage.
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
On
So
the label.
again to the Queen.
Yeah.
Slàinte mhath.
That's great, Gordon. And
Yeah. We will miss you. So,
and Ardnamurchan, it's a very rural location.
it's very rural.
And coming up-
it's on a single track road. It's about a 25-mile single track road journey.
Well, coming up later on in this programme, Gordon, if we have time, I would love to take you to the Cotswolds. Which is a visit I performed in summer, and it is very rural as well.
Well, I mean, it's also quite relevant, of course, because we're talking about the Queen and Britain and things like that, and whiskey is now not just Scotch. Of course, Scotch is but it's an English thing, it's a Welsh thing, it's an Irish thing, so we should celebrate it all, particularly in this at this current time. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think Cotswolds have done some really interesting things, and I'm really interested to hear hear what was happening.
Don't want to give any facts away there, but it's packed full of some interesting facts. But Gordon, a couple of things just to, I wouldn't say lighten the mood, but I have and you've touched on one or two of these facts already. How would you like to play? I've got the answer. What's the question? Royal Special.
Yes, absolutely. Let's go for this.
You've already blown my first one out. Brackla in 1835 by William IV.
Oh,
That's
right,
the
yeah.
answer.
One
What's the question?
1-0.
You've got to
What was the first Scotch whisky distillery to get a royal award?
Yes, that's right. 1835. I mean, that's really at the birth of the. We're 1833.
Yeah.
Here, so that's really beginning to motor the
Absolutely, yeah.
industry. Okay, question 2. She would drink it with water, soda, claret, or in tea.
How would Queen Elizabeth drink whiskey?
Not quite. You've got to go further back.
Oh, Queen Victoria?
That's right. How would Queen Victoria drink her whiskey? With water, soda, claret. Now there's a cocktail.
Well, so you should get some claret and give it a try.
Or in tea, and of course, that famous movie with Billy Connolly, John Brown, The Gilly, who's said to have introduced Queen Victoria to whiskey to keep her warm. She fell in love with it. She already, along with her husband, who died sadly, Albert, started giving patronage to local distilleries.
Right,
and I believe in 1893-95, 2 Royal Warwickshire distilleries in Deeside, which caused a bit of consternation in London. She was hitting the sauce a bit hard. Here we go. 3. The answer is Ballindalach in 2015. Have you been to Ballindalach?
I have. I was there. I was there 2 weeks ago, seeing a friend of mine, Karen, who works for them.
Oh, right. I've stood outside. I've never actually been in.
Small distillery. Worm tubs.
Oh, right.
It's got the worm tubs. Nice little setup, and I think they're coming close to producing their first whiskey, which is very exciting.
So that was something happened in 2015.
Princess Anne opened it.
Oh, you've hit the bar, Gordon. You've hit the bar. Charles.
King Charles III.
Prince of Wales opened Ballindalach in 2015. So you're saying that's now what? 7
it's not
years ago?
It's not going to be a 3-year-old, but I think they're not far off a new whiskey, which I think is very exciting.
Well, that's interesting because I don't want to give too much away with the Cotswolds Distillery, but they did release a 3-year-old whiskey. So
As long as
that's a
it-
decision you have to make.
But as long as it's great, it doesn't. If
Yeah.
it tastes great, age does not matter.
That's a very interesting, great debate. The answer is 1935, 2 years before George V's death. What is the question?
So
1935,
So 2 years before
George V's death.
something happened. It must.
Yep.
Is it another royal warrant?
Yeah. Oh, yes. This is a royal. Yep.
No, okay. I can't think of another whiskey single malt that's got a royal warrant.
It's a tough one. This one. It's a real tough
Right,
one.
okay, you
Johnny
might have-
Walker. Johnny Walker.
Johnny
Finally
Walker.
secures a royal warrant 1935. So it takes a while for him to get a royal warrant, considering how massive they were
course,
then
yeah.
and they are now. And I believe 75 years later they released a special George V bottling as
Oh,
well.
there we go. Very good. Didn't know that. Thank you very much.
So that's very good, Gordon.
Great.
Now, Gordon, usually on a normal show we do the whisky news,
Uh-huh.
and I think we had a wee chat over a dram before the show, and you were saying possibly not a bad time to have a reset of the industry. Lockdowns in most countries are over.
Yeah.
COVID's sort of hopefully a distant memory. Could you paint a picture of the industry?
Well, you've been out and about as well, so you can get a feel for it. But I think certainly from an industry perspective, we're under unprecedented times in terms of costs to produce.
Is that just energy?
Not just energy. I mean, energy, in this country for businesses there's no cap, there's no, so there's a lot of issues with that. And we're hearing 4 times more expensive to produce, which, is significant. From a power perspective, barley, the prices of barley is going up. The price of casks are going up. So sherry casks, bourbon casks, the availability of bourbon casks is less. So there's a lot of factors that are making whiskey very, very expensive.
And have you heard about this cardboard thing as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just from a producing distillery perspective. And then all the on cost, all the dry goods of bottles, bottles are more expensive and the delivery is longer and you have to order more. Capsules, all these things feed into the problems and the issues that some distilleries are having with getting products out to market. Add in the shipping costs and the shipping issues.
Yeah.
It's throughout the whole process. So, I think it's not going to go away in the short term, but it's just a little bit of stark realization that if you can't get your favourite whiskey at the moment, there's a lot of factors that might be impacting on that.
I can already hear people thinking, listening to this, will be thinking, when's that feeding through to the shelf?
Well, I mean, I think, there's no secret that I think people have seen Scotch whisky prices, single malt prices rise. If I'm honest, I don't see it changing. I don't see, there's not going to be a sudden, we're suffering from inflation here, as is the world. So across everything, I'm afraid Scotch whisky is probably only going one way at the moment.
Now, we're going to have a listen to the Cotswolds, an English distillery. What's happening out there in the world? Scotch whisky seems to be, it's not under siege, but my goodness, there's an awful lot of competition now that there never was.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's just, if we look in a very general sense, if you're an established business, the last 2-3 years has been pretty good, if we're honest, in terms of selling whiskey and making profit. That's good for everybody who works in the industry. It's good for, the sort of strength of the Scotch whisky industry. So Scotch is looking great. If we look into Scotland, we have a lot of new distilleries who now are going to be suffering from higher energy costs, higher production costs, and maybe don't have a whiskey released as yet. And that is really challenging for them. And I hope that the well-funded ones, they're all well-funded and they get through it. But there's also a crowded element at the moment in whiskey in general. I was in the States in May and there's a lot of bourbons and I mean, I don't know, I'm unsure of the market for bourbons that are more regional but similar tastes. I'm not sure on that, and I think there may be a bit of a consolidation going on in there. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to happen in Scotland. Australia, I've just been in Australia. There's a lot of distilleries in Tasmania as well. And I think from a smaller producer perspective, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years. But we're in unprecedented times in making whiskey. But what is really interesting when you come to Glengoyne, or you speak to anybody from most other distilleries, everybody's producing. Nobody's cutting back. And despite the problems with bottles and the problems with all that sort of side of it, far less barley, casks and things like that, everybody is producing. So
and how's the demand? Because if that dries up,
well,
at the moment, it would be fair to say that it's selling. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a general sense, whiskey is selling. I think the market is relatively buoyant. But look at what's going on in the world. I think we're going to have inflation in the long term across most of the Western world. We're going to have other issues, and ultimately, for a lot of people, whiskey is a luxury. So what you may see is, I think what happened in lockdown was people traded up. So if you were drinking a 15, you might have bought an 18, or you were buying a bottle of whiskey at £50 on a general basis, you may have spent 70. We may see that go back again, and people spending a little bit less on their whiskey. But, there's always demand at the moment. Whiskey, Scotch whiskey particularly has a lot of demand. And but there are unprecedented factors in all aspects of getting the bottle to the market.
Yeah. And in your lifetime, have you seen
that? No, never seen anything like it. No, and that's quite a long time.
Yeah. I feel that is amazing. That might not be a bad stopping point to have a little listen to your friends. Have you met Rob Patchett before?
I have not met Rob Patchett, but I like the name.
But this was on my general holiday, Gordon.
So you were on holiday, but you were still working.
Yeah. I took this little device down, and it was a great way of getting into the distillery. And I just want you to listen to this and come back with one or two very interesting facts that come out of this visit to an English single malt whisky distillery. Take it away.
Hi Gordon, I'm Rob. I'm the Global Whisky Ambassador here at the Cotswolds Distillery.
Rob, finally, it's quite a journey to get into the Cotswolds. I thought I'd passed the Cotswolds in a previous life, but my goodness, you are in the middle of what I think is nowhere.
Yeah, no one's passing us accidentally. We're very much a remote place, but quite a nice little safe haven of good whiskey in the middle of the Cotswolds countryside.
It's like heaven. This is like an oasis for any whiskey lover out there. Listen, Rob, thanks for joining us on Whisky Unscripted. You've given me a little whistle stop through the distillery. Can we go somewhere for a chat?
Absolutely, yeah. Let's do it.
Good. Preferably a room with whiskey bottles in it.
Of course, always.
Right, okay, so here we are in the... where are we, Rob? Where have you taken me to? There's whiskies all over this place.
So right now we are in the whiskey blending room here at the distillery. So this is a room where we're able to do research and development, sensory analysis, but also the blending of future releases. And just to paint a picture, one long table across the room with multiple shelves of hundreds of bottles of not only our whiskey, but whiskies from distilleries that we appreciate, and then we've also got archives of all of our casks and all of our new make samples as well.
Oh, lovely! That's lovely. So, Cotswold Distillery. Let's just get to the start. Where did it all begin?
So we started with our owner Dan Shaw. He had aspirations to start a whiskey distillery after quite a successful career in New York and Paris and London. But his one true love was always whiskey. And so a few chance happenings occurred in which he decided that he was going to start a Cotswolds distillery based on, he lived in the Cotswolds, he wondered why no one had ever started a distillery here, even though there are barley fields as far as the eye can see. And so with some help from various friends in the industry, such as the great Jim McEwan, who was definitely a man that was influential in Dan's decision making, and then working with people like Harry Coburn and Jim Swan, having the team from Forsyths as part of the installation initially in 2014. It really was about Dan's dream to create a whiskey, but working with the best in the business to make sure that we did it correctly.
That's some great names there. And you said this is a Swan distillery.
Yeah,
Jim Swan
yes.
The processes in place here. So at the beginning, it was a farm.
Yeah.
Then this equipment arrives. What equipment arrives? And could you explain what's there right now and how it all fitted together?
Yeah, so initially we wanted Forsyths to come in, and from what I can gather from Dan's stories and talking to Dan is that we were put on a 3-year waiting list to work with Forsyths for our stills. So, Dan first started having these conversations late 2013, and 3 years would have been far too long, but a few chance occurrences happened with other distilleries that Forsyths actually said to Dan, listen, some things have happened. There are some stills that are exactly to the spec that you want, and we can come down in 3 months instead of 3 years, and we can kit out the entire distillery. And Dan just jumped at the chance and said yes. And that's when we were able to get Jim and Harry to come down and help our young team, because we started out and we had a couple of people that had been in the drinks industry, but Dan has no drinks background. So we really were calling on Jim to help us refine the entire process so that we could create the best spirit possible from day one, as opposed to, stabbing in the dark.
These are great names.
Yeah.
Great names to work with. So the process,
Yes.
I've had a peek into the distillery, and I do encourage anyone listening to come in. It's absolutely marvellous. 2 stills.
Yep, so right now, currently we're operating on 2 stills. So we've got Proud Mary, our wash still, and Janice, our spirit still, both of them 100% copper pot Forsyth stills. We're running a very clear wort on the mash. We're then going a 4-day fermentation on 2 yeast strains. So when we went up to the washbacks, and we got a brilliant aroma of, pineapple and banana bread and things like that, all those fruity characteristics, we're just trying to retain that to make a fruity spirit that almost smells and tastes like an eau de vie, so that we're creating a great spirit that we can then use really high quality casks to create the best liquid possible.
Yeah, so you've got long fermentation there. So you're talking how many hours?
96 hours.
96 hours fermentation.
Yep.
And your cut points are coming in quite high.
Jim Swan cut points, so we're cutting in at 75% ABV. The ABV rises up to about 82, and then we come down to 69 and cut out at 69. And that's 250 litres of spirit from the heart cut. Everything else is recycled through the low wines. But those 250 litres are high, fruity, bright. Yeah, really, really delicious.
I can see it in the bottles behind you there. The fruit's bursting out
Yeah.
of that new make spirit. So you've got the new make spirit. What are you maturing in?
So the majority of the casks that we're using are red wine STR casks. That's shaved, toasted, and recharred red wine casks. It was a development created by Jim Swan. He made them very, very famous by using them in Kavalan in Taiwan. The Vineyard Barrique is probably the most famous expression, but you'll find a lot of new distilleries using them because you get great extraction, great fruit character, integration of spirit and wood happens quite quickly, but in an organic fashion, so that it's not cheating the system. It actually creates a really nice, fine, balanced style of whiskey. And then we're using first fill bourbon, really great high quality sherry casks from the south of Spain. And then we've got some exotics as well, such as Sauterne, Pigny de Chiron, Madeira, Calvados, Port, to name but a few.
That's exciting. It's very exciting. You put that fruity character into those casks and you'll get some delicious whiskies. And I know you do. So, when did those whiskies start coming of age? Or can I take you back? When did the spirit start flowing? And when did I know there was gin as well, but when did the whiskey come of age?
So whiskey came of age in late September, early October 2017. Because of the STR casks and Jim's method of using fruity spirit, we could release a 3-year-old that was legitimately a delicious whiskey. It wasn't rushed, it was designed that way. So we started distilling around about the same time 3 years prior, and we were able to disgorge and produce our first bottle of whiskey live with Dave Broom at Whiskey Paris Live in 2017. And then when Dan came back, we had this huge party festival. We called it the Harvest Festival, in which we had a few thousand people here in the fields, just drinking drams, enjoying live music and enjoying the first whiskey released in the Cotswolds.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm not hugely up in all my English malts, but that must have been one of the first. It's a pioneer. Maybe not the first, but
no, not the first, but we were one of the earlier distilleries. I think we were the 4th distillery, and so 4th back in 2014 to establish as an English whiskey distillery. And as we sit here today, there are now 40 English whiskey distilleries. Yeah,
my goodness, that's amazing. And you were saying that. And we'll have to do a little bit more of this in Whisky Unscripted. The English Whisky Guild is now a thing. It's now organisation.
Yep, established this year in late May, early June. I mean, it had been a lot of work in the behind the scenes, working with various English whisky distilleries to set up the English Whisky Guild. But it's really exciting that we've got an English Whisky Guild. We have, I believe, 14 or 15 members, and all core distilleries within the overall movement, and just able to sort of future-proof and protect the category moving forward. Really exciting times.
Oh, that sounds great. Mother, there's a couple of questions. There's something exciting happening round the corner that you might take me to, possibly. We can have a look at.
We can maybe have a sneak peek, yeah.
And can we talk to anybody else about for a wee chat?
Yeah, so there's a few people lurking about that I think you should definitely talk to.
I think we should have a wander.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
yeah.
let's go. Right, Rob, you promised something almost exclusive for Whisky Unscripted. It's not really, but something quite exciting. Where are you taking me?
So just tucked around the corner from where we were just having our conversation, we have decided to build and open a brand new distillery for whisky.
What? This is amazing. We've just come round the corner here. There's a brand new building, and I can see two copper stills and a Forsyths van.
Yeah, we've got the team from Forsyths down here. They're doing an incredible job of installing a brand new distillery. So 8 washbacks, brand new mash tun, and 2 brand new wash and spirit stills for us as well. So that will take our capacity up to about 500,000 litres of pure alcohol a year.
Yes, maybe never mentioned that. At the moment it's what?
About 115, 120, so this will take us up fourfold to be one of the biggest English whisky distilleries, and it's really exciting.
It's really nice, isn't it? It's a distillery is being born. This is fantastic. And when's the opening date? When will you be in a field having another party?
Well, there's a few scaling things that we need to just iron out with regards to getting the spirit right, but we're hoping that around about September, October time we should be getting the spirit where it needs to be, and then it'll be nothing but a party from then.
Well, maybe we get you back on Whisky Unscripted when the button gets pressed.
Be my pleasure, yeah.
Going to have the same sort of buzz with Rosebank, of course, as well.
Of course.
In March we had the Forsyth Stills come down to Falkirk, and we're hoping that'll run round about Christmas time, January, and that'll be the same sort of buzz. So we'd maybe tune in with you guys as well and see how things are comparing and contrasting. So, Rob, you promised me some voices and other people to try and grab from a busy schedule here at the Cotswolds. Who have you got?
So Alice has just come over and joined us. Alice is Head of Sensory Development and R&D here at the distillery.
Alice, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
And
yeah, very well.
That sounds a very grand title. What does that entail?
All sorts really. So anything from kind of new product development on the gin side, all the way through to sort of sampling, tasting our maturing whiskey stock, and allocating casks for single casks and specific releases.
Single cask, quite exciting. That's quite
Yes,
nice.
yeah,
so
really
what kind
cool.
of singles are you working with?
All sorts. So, I mean, we have quite a range of what we call sort of exotics, anything outside of our sort of core range. So recently we've done sort of Madeira, we've done a sort of port, we're looking at Muscatel, we're looking at really all sorts, even to the kind of weird and wonderful tequila, vermouth, etc. as well.
Really exciting. Now you mentioned the 3-letter word that is hardly ever mentioned in Whisky Unscripted, which is gin. So that's so the gin is being distilled as well.
Yes,
inside
yep.
those buildings. So you do a whisky run and a gin run.
Yep. Yeah, so the gin is much more straightforward process for us. We also do a lot of kind of compounding with gin, so adding sort of sugar and things. So we have some flavoured gins and stuff. So not all just distilling on the gin side, a bit of sort of mixing and things as well.
And that's, Rob, just to bring you back in, it's quite a good money maker, I would imagine, gin as well. It's certainly maybe not as high as it was maybe the last couple of years, but still booming.
Gin for us is still really great, as well as helping us with a bit of cash flow in the early days. It also helps us build our brand on a global scale as well. So we were able to work with various export markets, building the brand with the gin, and then as soon as the whiskey was ready, they were all primed and prepped and ready to take it. So it's been quite strategic for us as well.
That's great. Sometimes I always slag off the gin, but didn't realise that's a great way of opening the door for the whiskey. Or maybe look on it as a different product. And Alice, what's it like working here in such a rural location? And what's on your plate in the short-term future?
It's great. I mean, I love the countryside, so it's the perfect place for me to be working, and to have something so exciting in such a rural area as well is really nice. And then short term, what we're working on at the moment is really developing those single casks and making sure that we're offering the best of our stock. So at the moment, for me, it's just tasting an awful lot of whiskey, really.
That sounds absolutely Why I'm on holiday. If I did it's a fortnight, I could have come down and been work experience for you. That's great. Listen, guys, thank you so much, Alice, for taking out your busy time. And it seems to be a busy time. So we're in the shop. This is wonderful. Could you just paint the picture? This was not here, or was it here before?
No, this wasn't here originally. Where we're actually stood was a garden that linked in between the distillery and the front office. We built this in 2018? 19, I was just corrected. Yeah, sorry. Anything pre-pandemic just blurs into it. But 2019 we built this, and we're stood in the shop right now. Nice, big, beautiful open air. We've got 2 mezzanines where we can do whiskey and gin blending classes. We've got a cafe where people can just enjoy a bite to eat, some coffee and some whiskey and gin.
And
cocktails.
what's nice, Robbie, as you're sitting here, you can look through and see the stills.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's a lovely bonus.
We do 3 tours a day, but if you can't get on a tour because they do book up quite quickly, you can just have lunch and watch the distillers hard at work at the same time.
That's wonderful. And can we have a quick look at the fruits of the product?
Of course, yes.
You know, you've got a core range. Take us through it.
So the core range we've got, and it's a great time right now because we established our core range this year. So our Cotswolds Signature, was the first whiskey we ever released back in 2017, and still to this day it's the most popular and the best-selling whiskey that we have. A blend of STR and bourbon casks, super fruity, apricots, demerara sugar, really nice like apple and pear style notes as well. And then we've got new to the family, we've got our Cotswolds Reserve, which is predominantly bourbon cask with a little of STR in there as well. And that is just like walking through an apple and pear orchard with loads of flowers and everything in it with regards to flavour. And then after that, we kick up into our cask strength expressions, in which we've got expressions of bourbon cask, sherry cask, where we're using a combination of Oloroso and PX sherry.
Lovely colour.
Yeah, amazing colour. Everything we do here is natural colour, non-chill filtered as well. We've got our Founder's Choice, which is 100% STR, a bottling that we actually dedicate to Jim Swan as well. Dan's favourite expression, Dan the owner, but also Jim's introduction of the STR has been quite important to us. So the Founder's Choice was our second release and still one of the most important things that we do. And then we've also got our peated cask, in which we're maturing our spirit in quarter casks from an Islay distillery that will remain nameless, but I'm pretty sure we can all figure out which one it is. And that's our way of having a peated release without actually having peated malt.
Yeah. Using the cask.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. And then we have some seasonals as well. So we have our spring release, which is Hearts and Crafts, and we release this every year, a small little parcel of between 3,000 and 5,000 bottles. We've done previously in 2020, we did Sauterne. In 2021, we did Pigne de Charonne, and then this year we've done rum cask. So they're really nice expressions of what French oak does with our spirit. So we've got nice spice, we've got a bit of more tannin, and then more obscure style flavours as well. And they sell phenomenally well as single batch releases.
That's a lovely idea though, seasonal.
Yeah, we've got a new one coming out this year which we're quite excited about as well, the Harvest release. So that's coming out later September as well.
Great. Listen, that's a wonderful range, Rob, and it's a very wonderful destination. I'm just looking round because there's always something more to see, but you can certainly spend a few hours in this little corner of the Cotswolds.
That's the idea, between an amazing whiskey range, a great gin range, a nice terrace, a cafe, tours.
And how many people roughly a year coming in?
Between here and the 2 other shops that we have in the Cotswolds, we say about 100,000 people a year.
Wow. So get yourselves down here. But you'd have to book first, I think. That's the... Listen, thanks so much for giving us a whistle-stop tour. I'm going to put the flip-flops back on and get into holiday mode.
Absolutely, the sun is shining. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. Rob, thank you so much for joining us on Whisky Unscripted.
Thank you, Gordon. Cheers.
So at the beginning, it's Rob Patchett, of course, Gordon. I do apologise, Rob, to know you're listening. But what a great guy, what a great place. Now, the facts
I've never been. I want to go.
You must. It's really interesting. And how I did not know when I rocked up there that Forsyths would be round the corner, building 2 more stills and 6 washbacks. So
there you go.
That's the expansion. But Gordon, I think if you heard Rob saying they were the 4th to start in England.
Yes, I think the
Now
first...
40 distilleries, as you heard there. 40.
Yes. So I think the first was St George's, which was in Norfolk.
Yes, I think you're great.
Andrew Nelstrop, I think, was the initial gentleman who started the first English whiskey company, I think it was called. In
we've got a date,
Norfolk,
right?
which is obviously the flattest bit of England.
Yes. The bread basket, sometimes
The
called.
bread basket of England, indeed. But and I don't know what 2 and 3 were, but fabulous. But you look at what Cotswolds are doing. Other people within whiskey generally, Bimber's another prime example.
Yep.
Really great whiskies coming out of
Very good whiskey.
everywhere, and that's great for everybody.
And just as you heard them there, just a quick word, Jim Swan Distillery, he was down there overseeing the creation of it all in those STR casks, as you heard, shaved, toasted, recharged.
I mean, Jim was an incredible man and had influence across a whole load of distilleries that we think of from day to day. So, died very unfortunately a few years ago, which was a real shame. But I met Jim out in Taiwan when I lived in Taiwan, and he was consulting for Cavalan out there. We were also at Kilhoman, and he was involved with Kilhoman in terms of producing their style of spirit, and also these STR casks, which we see being used more and more. Penderyn, Welsh whiskey, also very unique spirit there at high alcohol percentage of about 90+% alcohol. So it's a very high, very unique distillate and style of whiskey. But Jim, there's many others that I'm sure he's worked on.
And what a legacy. We've talked about this, a kind of royal themed show about people's legacy. And
for sure.
But what a legacy Jim has left.
He was the consultant that you would go to if I had £10 million and I wanted to build a distillery. What am I going to do that sets it apart? What spirit style am I going to create? And if you're particularly you're not like we have. So we knew exactly what we wanted to do at Rosebank. We wanted to recreate what was there. So we've used the same shape stills, etc. But if you're creating a distillery from nothing in a field somewhere,
it's exactly
what's
what
the style you want to
exactly what
create?
happened. That's why it's worth a visit. These distilleries at Jim, whose thumb and fingerprint is all over. And that's exactly what the Cotswolds embodies.
Absolutely.
It was a farm with loads of barley. How do we make it into distillery? And it's
and what
wonderful.
a beautiful part of the world the Cotswolds is. It should have lovely whiskey coming from it. It's just a stunning part.
Yeah. And just round the corner, that's where Tom Cruise had his 60th. And do you know what, Gordon? Our invite wasn't. Did you get? I didn't get one, sadly. But that's the kind of well-heeled client. The Cotswolds takes in.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. And a final point I thought was interesting, this year, the creation of the English Whisky Guild. This is really big. Now 14, 15 members on the board, but this is
really
becoming something...
I mean, to have something like that, if you look at what's happening in English whiskey, you look at what's happening in Japanese whiskey, ultimately, all these things can only bode well to support the credibility of these whiskies going forward. I mean, a lot of English whiskey producers would have looked to the rules of Scotch whiskey, obviously, in terms of how you make the single malt, for example. But also, even aside from that, you've got different styles of whiskies coming out now. It's a really exciting prospect.
Well, they did mention, as you heard there, about the exotic casks. That's one of their things are majoring on, just something really different. All these sauternes and
totally,
all the spirits that you can use nowadays, which is really interesting. I'm drinking one now, Arno Markin, from a lovely champagne producer, finished that lovely wine cask.
Exactly. No, fabulous. It's been very interesting. Must go, and I love what they do.
Well, Gordon, it's almost time to wrap up this episode. I think we've done very well. It's been, as you say, a strange time. Heading towards the Queen's state funeral on Monday, with the distillery closed, and here we are in the boardroom where many a decision has been made, and I think the decision should be to raise one final glass to the Queen.
Absolutely. Fantastic.